Hi, and welcome to my cultural presentation number 3 for Spanish 118. My name is Sandy Matheny. My cultural activities for this presentation included 1.5 hours of slow Spanish, or news in slow Spanish, and then I watched the movie Amores Perro, or Amor es Dolor, Love is Pain, and that one was a long one. It was 2.5 hours, and then I also watched the television show La Nina, and I watched 3 episodes. That one was really good. I'm very excited to talk about that one. So I decided to watch the news in slow Spanish. One of the other people in this course had mentioned that they had done it, and I thought it was a really great experience. There was a lot of opportunity to actually get more familiar with the grammar. So the way that it works is you have news anchors reading stories, and it's very formal, and then after they're done reading the story, they talk to one another, and that part I found very culturally interesting. um, Not only did it demonstrate some of the grammar lessons that we're learning, things like reflexive verbs and direct and indirect objects and how they use those, but it also was really interesting to hear the news anchors, and they were using that weird double L that other people have noticed, that is more common in Argentinians, the G as opposed to the Y. Um, but it was really interesting to hear their comments. They seem to think pretty much the same thing that Americans do about, like when they were talking about a coup in Venezuela, they were talking about how it seemed really interesting that Putin and Trump both seem to be involved in it. Just kind of interesting to hear the perspective of other people in different countries talk about those kinds of things. So that was a really interesting activity. I'm glad I did it. My next activity was watching the movie Amores Perros. It's a movie that was produced and filmed in Mexico City, and I felt like it was extremely authentic. I had heard, while I was growing up in Southern California, I lived about an hour and a half from the Mexican border, and I was always warned about the underside of the town of Tijuana, Mexico City, and all of that. And this movie does an excellent job. It's very well done, but it's also very graphic and it's very hard to watch. So I have to warn you in that regard. So the title Amores Perros basically is Love is a Bitch, and it's there's a lot of graphic thing elements in it, and so it's not for the faint of heart, and it was very hard for me to watch, but I felt like it was extremely authentic. I thought that it was very realistic. It showed 3 different stories, so 3 different people that it focused on and how their lives intersect on the streets of Mexico City. There's scenes of dog fighting. There's also scenes where people are nicer to their dogs than they are to other human beings, and well, I saw a lot of the themes of along the lines of like gender roles, male and female, male domination, and some of it was very not nice in this movie. And then the inequality that exists in the Mexican culture. You have the very wealthy, and then you have the very poor, and the fact that a lot of that disparity leads to a lot of crime, and then disloyalty and things like that. But anyway, it's a very good movie. It was nominated for the best foreign film by the American Academy Awards. This last activity was watching the television show La Nina, and was really interesting to me. Back in the 1980s, I worked with people from El Salvador, and who had come escaped war in their country and came to our country, and they would talk about things, but they never wanted to talk in detail. And this series is answering a lot of those questions for me. So it's based on a girl who is basically abducted by gorillas when she's about 8 years old, and she is with them for about 7 years. Her family has given up on her; they don't know if she's alive or dead, and she gets really brave. She decides to reintegrate into society, and there are programs that are helping people to do that kind of thing, churches, social workers. And anyway, through their help, she decides she wants to become a doctor. And during the show, they show some of the horrors that she experienced as being a child gorilla. There's a lot of family dynamics that play into this, the mother and her role, and her life is really hard in rural Colombia, and she just really wants to get her daughter back, but she also is driven by work and the needs of the family, and basically she doesn't want to support her daughter's desire to become a doctor. She just wants her to come back and work in the field, and she doesn't see the advantages of having a doctor in the family and how that could get them all out of the field, because it's not a part of their culture. Where it is here in America, we see opportunity because good things do happen for us. It's a really great series. It won the Cartagena Film Festival for Best Television Series, and it was produced in Colombia through the Caracol International. That's the only real production information that I could get for this particular series, but I highly recommend it. So I learned a lot of new words in these three different activities. In the news, in slow Spanish, tons of new vocabulary opportunities. And on the screen, it actually translates a lot of new phrases or newer phrases. So I learned some things like castiga a Mexico, and that is as in Trump punishes Mexico. Anuncio announced la frontera, the border. La bolsa de valores, the stock market. Los derechos humanos, that's human rights. So derecho not only means like right hand, it also means human rights. And then in Amores Perros, there was El Hugo. He is the goat, or an ex-guerrilla drifter who becomes a hitman. I warned you that that's a pretty graphic movie. Uh, Asesinado, assassinated. Secuestro, kidnapping. El Robo, robbery, and Que Onda. And that's how people who are familiar with each other might greet each other instead of saying, Hi, how are you? It's Que Onda. And in La Nina, um, I found it really interesting when the social worker was interviewing the child gorilla. She used less formal language than what we've been practicing. And I've been told that in this movie, or sorry, in this TV series, they actually use a lot of Colombian slang or colloquialism. So I'm thinking this must be one of them. So we've got Diga mi su nombre, tell me your name. And then when the girl answers, she says Tengo 15, as in I'm 15, leaving off the years old. And then tranquille, calm down. That was a big theme. Everybody needed to calm down. And tranquilita, meaning kind of easy does it. So, really great experiences, and I look forward to your comments.